Good morning, Rabotai. Welcome to Breakfast in the Class. Breakfast in the Class today is sponsored and dedicated Leilui Nishmat Leah Bat Chana. Ms. Lily Safra. Her philanthropy has reached so many throughout the entire world. Also, dedicated in loving memory of Charlie Surui, Alav Shalom, Leilui Nishmat Shaul Ben Hanam, Alav Shalom, by his friend Murray Dayan. Also anonymously dedicated in merit that their son should engage in the study and the limud of Torah. As well dedicated in loving memory of Sarah Penchasi, Alea Shalom, Nishmat Sarah Bat Mazal Veneria, sponsored by her son Pini Penchasi, Chazak Baruch. Also dedicated to Fuash Le'ema, for Chana Bat Sima Fega, sponsored by Drs. Habib and Rhonda Monas. And last but most certainly not least, is the Week of Cobra, which is sponsored by David Yesh in honor of you and your substantial capacity to do good today and every day. And in case you forgot how that goes, I just want to kind of show you our new cups that arrived in honor of you and your substantial capacity to do good today and every day. My friends, I just want you to know you cannot get these at any bodega, at anywhere else. There's nowhere else in the city that you could go to get these. In order to get one of these, you have to come to Breakfast in the Class. So we welcome you every day for your cup of joe and this delicious breakfast that we have, both physical and spiritual. Please only answer Amen if you're listening to this Beracha live. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam she'akol nהיה baro. Doesn't taste like water. Joking. Okay. There's a throwback to an earlier joke. Okay, fine. Let's move on, Rabotai. So our parasha describes, in the beginning, it describes the idea of the counting of Am Yisrael. In fact, that's the nature of the entire Sefer, is called after the Pikudim, the counting that you find in the beginning of the Sefer, and at the end of the Sefer, that God counts the Jewish people. Actually, in our Young Professionals shiur last night, we spoke a lot about this idea about counting the Jewish people and how it's described and it's laid out that the reason why God counts the Jewish people is because of how much He loves them. He wants to count them when he takes them out of Egypt. He wants to count them when they fall at the Egel. And we find that God is counting the Jewish people because of this great love. You always want to know, how many do I have? How many I have? If they passed away, if there was a place, how many are left, etc., etc. And on the flip side, we discussed this idea. The flip side of that is that counting is considered to be a negative thing. So how can it be both positive and negative? And that was a powerful shiur we spoke about last night with the young professionals. But my friends, I want to now take a look at another element of the counting of Am Yisrael that's described not in Sefer Bamidbar, but in Sefer Bereshit. In Sefer Bereshit, Avraham Avinu was promised two distinctly different things. One is that the Jewish people will be so many, asher lo yisafer merov. What does that mean? That they shall not be counted merov, from how many there are. That means they're uncountable. And then, on the flip side, right, we find that the Jewish people are actually given a number and a finite number, a finite existence. So, as an example, if you take a look, even in the Pesukim itself, where Avraham Avinu was promised, we say, if you count the stars, there are as many as the stars. So the Sfarim are wondering, why is it that we have two different descriptions about the Jewish people? One is that the Jewish people are uncountable, Am Yisrael. There's no number, asher lo yisafer merov. And on the flip side, there's a number. Like Avraham is told, go outside, count the stars. If you could count them, etc., etc. Are they countable or uncountable? So my friends, I want to point out that there are two different examples that are used by God in that same chapter, where we talk about how many Jews Avraham Avinu would merit to be able to have as part of his Am Yisrael. And what's interesting to me is that there are two different examples that Am Yisrael is compared to. One is that they'll be like the stars in the heaven, asher lo yisafer merov. By the way, you should just know, just an important factoid, There are more stars in the sky than there are people in this world. Not only there are people in this world now, I believe that the number of stars in the sky is greater than the amount of people that have ever lived on this world. That's how many stars there are in the vast galaxies that we inhabit. Okay, so it's a huge number. It's a wild, astronomical number. But yet, my friends, Am Yisrael is compared to the stars in the sky and also to the chol, to the dust of the earth. And the question is, can you begin to compare the dust of the earth to the stars in the sky? Now, some commentators point out that the reason why God uses these two examples is because Am Yisrael does not do vanilla. Either we're riding on top of the world, or we're being trampled underfoot. But to have some sort of middling existence, that's just not something that Jewish people do. And in fact, who expresses this idea perhaps most clearly in Scripture? We find that this idea is put forward by none other than the Rish'anta Zeresh, the wife of Haman. She advises her husband Haman to hang Mordechai. The very next day he comes back and his luck is turned and he's led Mordechai through the streets on the horse, saying, "Such shall be done to the man the king wishes to honor." He comes back home, Evel v'chafui rosh, he's miserable. And what does his wife say? Im mizera Yehudim. If this guy is from the seed of the Jewish people, that you began to fall in front of him, nafol tipol lefanav. You who are the highest are going to fall before him. So one idea that's put forward is that the Jewish people, our existence, our experience, is either one of being stepped on like sand or of being like the stars in the sky. Well, my friends, I want to share with you a different interpretation that's brought down in the Sefer Darchei Yosef. I believe he brings it from Ubaharta B'Haim, but I'm not 100% sure. I want to share with you a powerful idea. He said that there's a fundamental difference between a grain of sand and the star in the sky. And it's not just in size. He points out that if a star existed in the sky and it collided with another star, what would happen? They would explode. The two of them, from the power, the force of such an explosion, they would destroy each other, rent each other apart. In fact, we know, by the way, the explosion that comes when a meteor hits the earth, even if it's relatively small, not the size of a star or planet, but a meteor that could be, let's say, the size of a city, or the meteor the size of a town or of a state. A meteor the size of a state might wipe out the entire earth from the impact. So the stars in the sky, however great they are, their greatness is in how they are apart. Were they to be together, were they to come together, it would destroy them. The dust of the earth that Am Yisrael is compared to, the Pasuk describes it very specifically. It doesn't just say the chol on the earth, it says the chol asher al sefat hayam. The dust that is on the banks of the river. Why does the Torah tell you which dust? Does it matter if it's the dust on the basketball court, the dust, on top of your attic, or the dust on the ocean front? The Chachamim explain the reason why we specify this is because there's something that is necessary for the dirt to stay, for the dust, the sand to stay al sefat hayam, on the beach next to the ocean. And that is only possible when the dust and when the dirt sticks together. When the dirt sticks together, it stays on the beach. If there was one grain of sand that was alone, that was not attached or connected to something, what would happen to it when the wave came? It would take it away. It would be destroyed. It would be consumed or subsumed into the ocean itself. So therefore, what God was communicating to Avraham already back then is that there are two modalities in greatness. One greatness is the greatness that a person achieves when they are apart. And one greatness is the greatness that a person achieves when they are together. And I think that HaKadosh Baruch Hu needed to specify and delineate both of them. Because if I ask you which is better, together or apart, I think all of us naturally would say, right, we're better off together. Adrabah, unity, connection, Am Yisrael. What are we if not for the fact that we are connected? But my friends, in truth, HaKadosh Baruch Hu uses both examples. So it must be that there's a value also to being apart. My friends, the job of a human being in this world is to seek out greatness in both of these modalities. And let me explain what I mean. A person who constantly is together, a person who allows his brain, his mind, his dreams to be the dreams of the people that he's with. If he's waiting to be able to do something with everybody else, what happens when you ask a committee to do something? What do they call it? Death by committee. The idea dies just because you asked a group of people to do something. When does something great happen? When individuals step up and make something of it. That's how it works. If you give a team of people something to do, what happens doesn't get done because of the diffusion of responsibility. So for stars to happen, for light to shine, what do you need? You need something to stand apart. But my friends, to stand against something, there's no human being that can stand against something alone. And for that we need the power of the tzibur. And when we talk about this idea to stand against something, what does that mean? It doesn't only mean like this little grain of sand trying not to get swept into the ocean. That it's clinging to life is by clinging to its friend. It's not just the big things like anti-Semitism that we need to stick together, It's not just things like that. But there are many things that a human being needs to stand against. Sadness, depression. That's a person needs to fight back against certain negative forces that threaten to overwhelm him or her. And in order to do that, so often a person needs the power, the koach, or the ability to lean on somebody else. So what God says to Avraham is, Avraham, you're the most single individual person that ever lived. Right? Avraham is called Avraham the Ivri. Avraham, classically that's translated as the Hebrew. Right? That's where we get the name Hebrew, because Ha-Ivri. But what's fascinating about that is that the Midrash explains that why was Avraham called Avraham Ha-Ivri? Because he was on Chad Ivra Dinahara. He was on one side of the river, and the entire world was on the other, Me'ever Hanahar, from the other side of the river. This idea doesn't only describe the geographical positioning, the GPS of Avraham's home. He lived on one side of the river, then the other side of the river. Every night when he came home, he sang to his wife, "Take me to the river." That's not what it means. Avraham Avinu living on one side of the river means that he was apart from everybody else. The world worshipped Avodah Zarah. Avram sets a goal, a path, a road to be different to everybody else. The world is a world that is selfish, that is focused on their needs. Avraham Avinu builds a world, a family, a legacy, which is about helping other people. Avram is the biggest loner in the world. And in truth, Am Yisrael as well, Hen Am, they are a people, Livadad Yishkon. They live alone. We're loners. We're different. We always have been. We always will be. But my friends, it is true that in order to become great, we need to be alone. We need to think for ourselves. Sometimes a person experiences this in their family. This is what the family does. But the person needs to think differently than the family. Everyone in the family does this. Everyone in the community does this job. If everyone is zigging, what do you need to do if you want to do something special? You need to zag. You need to find another path, another way, another product, another opportunity, another tzedakah, another institution. You have to do things differently in order to achieve, in order to bring light to a situation. But my friends, no man is an island, and we need people. And people doesn't only mean a spouse or a family, although it can be. Who is Abraham's people? When God commands Avraham Avinu to do the story of the Brit Milah, he goes to speak to his best friends, Yani. Aner, Eshkol, and Mamre. Those are Avraham's three friends. And he speaks over how should he do it, what's the smartest way to do it. They're giving him advice. Even Avraham Avinu, the great lone Avraham, the one whose last name is Avraham the Ivri. He's the person who's always different. My friends, even he needs someone to be able to connect to. My friends, I think that that's really the intention of God's communication, that greatness requires both traits, the ability to be apart, to think different, to not need anybody, and at the same time, kechol asher al sfat hayam, to recognize that when we're alone, we get swept away. We get swept away by challenges. We also get swept away by our own vision. We forget. We stop figuring out how to relate to other people when we're so busy being different from other people. My friends, I think that's why HaKadosh Baruch Hu talks about the countable and the uncountable. You see, this idea of asher lo yisafer merov, lo yimaded, they're unmeasurable, they're uncountable, right? Why? Why are they uncountable? You know, I was thinking to myself, it's such an interesting thing. When things are apart, it's very easy to be able to count something because they're apart. The difference, the space between object one and object two allows you to accurately count those things. Sometimes something's uncountability is not because there are so many of them per se, but that there's so many of them together that eventually you can't pull them apart. You know what it's like? The Gemara describes a certain person who asks about this pasuk, Asher lo yisafeh merov, what does it mean? You can count them. And he's counting, he's telling Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, he's like, look, I can count the stars, look, I'm counting them. He asks the guy, he says, how many teeth do you have in your mouth? The guy's like, He goes, you don't know how many teeth you have in your mouth, you're telling me you know how many stars are on the sky? Right? Credit Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel. But then the Gemara describes something else that he does. He takes a plate, it's got many things on the plate, and he spins the plate. And he says, now count them. And now that it's moving, and there's all these different things on the plate, and every time he tries to count, he can't remember if he counted this one or counted that one because it's all jumbled together. He stops it. He wants to count. He can only count it when it stops. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel said that what you're seeing, this spinning, is also what's going on in the Shamayim. Now, you could look at this example that Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel gave and think that he was telling them, okay, that there's motion, there's movement in the planets, in the universe. But I think Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel was communicating to him was something very different. The nature of counting is the ability to box something in and to make it a number. The fact that people are sho'ef, are trying, are growing, they have dreams, they have goals, they move. People move, they progress, they become better, they do teshuvah for the sins that they did. They try to take on bigger mitzvot. Means that even when you look at a person and you think you're able to say that's one, they are uncountable. My friends, I love this idea. There's so many Jews, but the Jewish people are infinite, not because of the numbers. Even though the pasuk says lo yisafer merov, you know what it means? It doesn't mean lo yisafer merov because there's so many of them. But rov could also mean something that becomes bigger, something that becomes stronger, something that becomes more profound, more pronounced. You know, when we look at the achievements of Am Yisrael, of the Jewish people, and how disproportionate they are, Lo yisafer merov, from everything that they've been able to do, from everything they've been able to accomplish. If a person does not remember this about themselves, my friends, then they are eminently countable. Then they are not this infinite being with infinite possibilities. I want to just explain, I want to just explain for a minute what this means to me today. I still remember, when they took this guy, Manute Bol. You guys remember Manute Bol? They took Manute Bol, they brought him to the Washington Bullets. Remember that? The guy was 7'6", I think. Yeah? Or was that Sean Bradley?
No,
7'6". They brought him in, he was a stick. Where'd they get him from? 7'6" stick of a guy. No muscles on his legs, on his arms. I mean, it's wild to see him. He looks like a praying mantis, okay? Right? This is wild. Where did he find? A scout, an NBA scout, went on a trip to Africa. Anyway, as part of his trip, they take him to see some, indigenous tribe. They're all sitting around the fire. He sees this guy, the tallest guy ever saw in his life. He said, I have a great idea, right? In basketball, if you're 7'6", who can stop you? Who's going to stuff you? I don't even think Manute Bol needs to leave his feet in order to dunk. Right? They showed him. He's like, so the first time they gave him a ball, actually, they handed him a ball, they told him to go stuff the ball. You know what he did? No, he ran up, he jumped up to stuff, he broke his tooth on the rim. You gotta fact check me on that one, by the way, but as far as I remember, he broke his tooth on the rim. This is a guy, but I just want to point out, one day ago, the guy's sitting around the fire, wearing a towel around his waist, doing a rain dance. I don't know what he's doing, right? A tribe in the middle of nowhere. One day later, television cameras on him, a contract. He's flying with Sammy. You understand? David's selling him a penthouse apartment. It's fantastic. Guy basically moves into Safra. One day. If you'd have asked Manute Bol one day earlier, when he was going to bed, you come to Manute, you say, Manute, can I have a minute of your time? I need to ask you a question. Just a question. What do you see? What do you see yourself accomplishing in your life? Had that would have said it, maybe I want maybe a bigger towel, maybe he's thinking about a bigger fire, maybe one day he'll have a blanket. Right? What were his dreams? How small could he see himself? What was his future in his own mind? It was so limited. But all it took was for God to arrange the stars in a certain way that the guy, this NBA scout on vacation, winds up sitting at this fire instead of at that fire. And one day later, the guy with no talent, they gave him a ball, he breaks his teeth on the rim. You understand? No talent. No. And you think to yourself, right, wow, one day later, the world is his oyster. My friends, that moment that happens for him, it unlocks possibilities that we did not know existed for ourselves. Many times we need the safety of numbers. We need the achdut, we need to be part of a community, to be raising our children with a community, to need the village to raise our family. We need the synagogue, we need our friends, our family. But my friends, sometimes a person who lives like that is also bound and limited by the groupthink of everyone that he's with. And the dreams that he has are limited. And the wildest things he can imagine for himself are about a fraction of what potentially could happen for him. And not in a month or in a year, tomorrow. Tomorrow. The challenge, my friends, is being able to think of yourself with both of these ideas in mind. To see yourself as the most individual, and to see yourself also as part of a kahal, of a klal, and connected with everyone around you. The people who forget that ultimately implode. May Hashem bless us to be able to achieve and to be both part of both wondrous elements of Am Yisrael, that our achievements should be lo yisafer miro, from how great they are, that our horizons and our dreams should be unfettered by the mundane reality of the people around us, that we should be zocheh to dream incredibly, incredibly big. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.